Right. Let's make a start. So make yourself comfortable in your chair. Rub your hands together. And then tapping over your face. And over your head and neck. Onto one shoulder. The other side. Your chest. Belly. And your legs. And then sitting back in the reclining posture. Take a couple of slow, gentle breaths. Get yourself settling into the chair. Sometimes it can be helpful just to cast your mind back to the last session or a Tai Chi session where you felt that quietening, just to remind yourself that A, it's possible, and B, just what it does feel like. And memory has quite a powerful effect on us sometimes. Remembering something can take you back there in many ways. And it's one of the ways that we engage our minds, I think, in Tai Chi. But however you access it, just looking for that quieter, more spacious quality in the body, but also in our mind, because it's a sort of gathering together of our thoughts. And then coming to the upright position. That gathering together is an interesting process. It's hard to find the right term. We could talk about focusing, or we could talk about concentrating, but a lot of those terms have quite a kind of hard edge to them. If you're concentrating on something, sometimes quiet, go away, don't talk to me, I'm concentrating, sort of thing. It shouldn't be like that. And an image that I heard a meditation teacher called Christina Feldman use for this kind of mental process was that she likened it to a bit like a sheepdog herding sheep, which I think is quite interesting. The dog kind of encourages or herds the sheep into a greener pasture or a safer place or something like that. And so this idea of sort of bringing together and gathering your thoughts into that quieter space where they can settle a little bit, rather than like, I must concentrate on this or I must concentrate on that, is perhaps a better image to use. And the thing that we gather around, the place that we gather around, of course, is our own bodies, our posture and our movement and so on. So a little bit of your weight forwards, a third of your weight forwards in your feet. Most of your weight back and a very strong feeling of your hips sinking back into the chair. Nice long feeling up through the middle of your body, feeling that your upper body is supported, your head is supported from deep in the body, below from your feet and your hips, allowing that release of tightness and stiffness, or at least in theory allowing that. This is another thing that is quite difficult, and quite often you might think, well, the shoulder's a bit stiff, and just in noticing that the shoulder drops down and you lose some of that tightness. And that can be a bit frustrating if 5 minutes later you realise it's come back again. But try not to get frustrated at that. It's actually normal, in my experience, for that to happen. And then slowly turning your head. We want to retain an awareness of what we're doing. And physically, what we're looking to do is to very gently increase that feeling of space within the body. Not by straining or stiffening up, struggling with the boundaries of the movement. But with an idea like water flowing through the body, filling up the space and just dissolving away the boundaries. And then the shoulders. There's always these opening exercises, gives an opportunity to try out these ideas without anything too complicated going on, so that we get familiar with them. We can begin to feel them working in the more complex exercises. And then going forwards, and then hands out to your sides. And then winding your arms around. And back the other way. Rest your hands. Ease forwards. And push back. So this is going straight forward, your weight equally divided between the two sides of your body, but now when you turn, go it more strongly in the direction that we're turning towards. Making sure that you, again, you don't resist that, you don't tighten up against that, but rather let your leg absorb the movement. Imagine if you were leaning into one of these big blue balls you get in gyms, or if your leg was a spring, then, or like if you get into your bed, the mattress sort of absorbs your weight. It's the same kind of process. And then it will push you back up. And then turn in the other direction. And then going around. And then go back the other way. Coming back to the center, feeling how your body is supporting itself in this position. And then when we go to move the leg, there will be a slight shift as you raise your heel, but still a lot of the body concerned with maintaining that stability. And then you're free to just push the foot out and then pull back. We plant the foot, put your heel down, lower your toes, and just gently press your foot into the floor to really get that contact with the floor. So make sure you're not overstepping. It's quite a short step to enable us to practice this. And then on the other side, raise your heel, step out, pull back. Planting the foot. Now, give yourself a moment to settle in. Hands down by your sides. Fisherman cast the net. Once again, that springy quality in your legs as your weight goes forwards until the feet and your legs just expand again, pushing you back. Feeling also how your hips dropping back help to pull you up. And again, there's a similar sort of springiness, more subtle, but still there in the hips and your lower back as your weight comes back. That springiness, of course, really relies on the release of tightness and stiffness in your body. And it's just a natural attribute of our bodies. And change. Drawing your arms over. One more time, going forwards. And then this time, as you come back, turn your hands palm in. Feeling added to that sort of springiness in the lower part of the body, similar kind of elasticity in the upper body, feeling your rib cage open and close. One more time. Changing, pushing away. More economic movement, so that same expansion and contraction, opening and closing in your chest. And everything is sort of more compact, and as a result, a little bit more strength there, internal strength. Like if you've got a suitcase, the more you pack in, the sort of denser the suitcase becomes. Do one more of these. And then rolling your fingers into the hollow fist, not tight. And still, partly because of the big rotation in your shoulder down through your arms, still detectable, very subtle now. Now opening and closing, particularly here, just where your arm meets your chest, that little sort of, what you could describe almost like a valley. One more time. Let's just go back to the pigeon spreads its wings. We'll do one of each. Pigeon spreads its wings, pushing away, punch with both hands. Now we go into pushing away. We get a nice sense of change and flow from one movement to another. Different images, slightly different patterns of movement, but still governed by that regular transfer of your weight from feet to hips. Just requiring that you're a little bit more focused, a bit more gathered. So that ability to find that space inside is strengthened through this. Last time. We're going to change now to winding movement, winding the hands out. And now change the vertical movement, expanding, contracting. One more of these. Change to the wild goose. And part in the clouds. Now dragon plucks the stars from the sky. One more time. And then change. So going back to that idea of, if you like, herding our thoughts into a quieter space, we gradually learn a kind of physical location for that space, a point that we can bring our attention back to enable that little moment of quietness, both mentally and physically, of space, of letting go, allowing the stiffness and the tension, the stress to just dissolve a little bit as a consequence. And really, we could do that with anything, but because it's Tai Chi, it's important that we find that in the middle of the body and from there down in to the ground, to our feet, the legs. And we see that very clearly with this exercise. We extend out, and where we draw back into, where our hands come back to, is this point just by our hips. That's where our attention comes back to. And as you can see, it's a regular thing. This is not either being active and pushing out or being quiet and calm, but rather how those two things work with each other. The drawing in leads to the pushing out leads to the drawing in. So there's a rhythm there that we get used to that helps us to regularly, to use a term, sort of touch base, as it were. And then this time, push out and turn. And then face forward. So we've now got a 4-part sequence. Apart from anything else, if you get confused, as is inevitable really when we start doing something a little bit more complicated, what can happen then is that almost a sense of panic sets in, which sounds silly because it's just an exercise, we don't need to panic, and yet that does happen. All we actually need to do is just come back to the centre. What I sometimes say to people is, if you get lost in this exercise, come to this position, we'll catch you up. It's not a problem. One more round. And then scooping the sea and looking at the sky. And then change to grasping the tiger's ears, a hollow fist, both hands. Switch sides. So remember, you're taking your head, your hands towards the extended foot. Don't have the foot too far out to the side. And this time changing one more time. And bring your feet back. Come back to just sitting for a few moments. About your overall posture, that way that your head is supported by your feet and your hips, and by this almost column-like feeling going up through the middle of your body. You need to sit back so that you feel your back is supported. Don't strain. And then just opening your eyes and once again going forwards and backwards and circling around. So when we do this, it's a relatively small movement. If you imagine that your feet and your hips form the corners of a square, the circle that your head is making really stays within the boundaries of that square. You may find after a little while that you can go a little bit further. And that's partly because you're sinking your hips more. But I don't want to end up right out here. Now I'm straining. I go too far forwards. I could even tilt out the chair and so on and so forth. Just think about that range of movement. And then, with one hand, you let your hand just extend out a little bit. So when I circle, I'm turning around to the right. So I'm using my left hand, just drawing the hand around as though I'm drawing a circle or rolling a ball around. So feel the connection from your hip to your shoulder, down into your elbow, your wrist, and into your fingers. In theory, this should be quite straightforward. The circle is a very simple shape, but in practice, it's quite difficult to keep the continuity and the shape of the movement, the flow of the movement going. And this is where, again, we become very aware of the significance of this center part of your body, the movement of your weight. Your arm is actually hardly doing anything. It extends out a little bit, it comes back, but the rest of it is done in the center of the body, transmitted through your back. And then change direction, so going round in a circle and back. And even with this, once again, we have the idea that we extend out a little bit as we go forwards and around, but we regularly come back. The circle itself brings us back. And getting familiar with this rhythm, this extension from, this movement from extension, yang, to contraction, yin, and the interweaving, the interdependence of those two stages is something that begins to just view all of our movements. And then besides my right hand following the movement, my fingers are just slightly separated, not pulled out tight, slight curve through my fingers and the palm of my hand, as though they were resting on a ball. So one of the things that people sometimes say they find difficult about Tai Chi is coordinating the body, coordinating arms and legs or waist and arms or something like that. Try not to think of it as separate movements, as separate parts. Think of it as one movement with the center part of your body acting like the hub in a wheel. You ride a bicycle, the hub turns, and it turns everything at once. There's not a separation there. So now alternating, come back, and then on the other side. Follow your hand back into the center, turn the other way, switch hands. And then just start to let the movements overlap a little bit. This is a movement called stirring the beads. And now what we have is, on one side of the body, our arm is extending, on the other, it's contracting. So both stages, both extension and contraction, are happening around the center part of the body. Just like in a bicycle, you spin a bicycle wheel, some spokes are going up at the same time as some are going down. Some are going to the left, and some are going to the right. One more on each side. And then something a little bit more familiar and simpler, simply holding the ball and now moving your arms around in a vertical circle, but still with that same awareness of what's happening in the center of your body. And you'll find that this movement, surprisingly perhaps, I was surprised when I first realized it, it's actually quite strong in the lower part of your back. There's a good reason for going carefully, but also makes it quite an interesting, quite a useful exercise. If you're tight in the lower part of your back, then nice and easy, remember to turn, and it's almost like a dog wagging its tail. A little bit of movement in the spine, a soft massaging quality of it. And then change direction. One more time. And then rest your hands together. And tapping over your face. Over your head and neck. Down to one shoulder. Your arm. The other side. Your chest. Belly. Your legs. Okay, so stand carefully, and when you stand, remember that process of gathering your thoughts. Don't just stand and sort of dash into something, but stand and just give yourself that moment to gather in. If you think about it, this makes the whole idea, it can sound slightly sort of philosophical in a sense, but it's actually very practical. When we consider, for instance, that a time when where we might fall is when we first stand up, and especially if we're in a hurry, the phone rings or the doorbell rings, you leap up, and you can fall over at that point quite easily. And if you can just take a moment, and if you get into the habit of taking a moment, and it is only a moment, so I've been emphasizing that in this class, and it's good to do that. But when you get used to doing that, it really can happen very, very quickly. Just that little moment of centering can be very, very valuable. So now sinking your weight down and pushing up. Sinking down represents that returning to the center, to the root, whatever you think of it as. It doesn't just represent it, but is the return. So we become familiar with the sensations in our body that we would look for to achieve that. And again, memory becomes very important at this point. And then change into the wild goose. And part in the clouds. Shake out. 1 foot forwards. So a comfortable stance, keep your feet hip width, about the same in length. Remember, as you get more used to this, you may find that as you sink down more, it's just slightly longer, but you really just want a posture that allows you to comfortably move just over half your weight, really. When you go forwards, about 60% of your weight initially. When you go back, more like 70. But just to move your weight comfortably and fluidly from one foot to another. And going back to this sort of pausing, this quietness, just taking a moment at each point to really settle. And again, that feeling, what was it you experienced in that rooting down? What are the sensations that you would want to, what are the things you'd want to recall, if you see what I mean? What sticks in your memory? And then as you pause, just raising your toes and your heel, we see that the pausing is the moment when we can actually begin to think about the step in, think about the alignment of the body, work with those kind of things. So although I'm talking about sort of pausing and things like that, it's not a passive thing, it's not doing nothing, it's a kind of change in the state of our mind as much as anything else. Remember, as you do this, you can always use a wall or a chair for support. And then if you're ready for this, just stepping in. And check out. The other foot forwards. Same thing again. You may find that this works better on one side for you than another. That's not at all uncommon. And again, in that moment of pausing, in that quietness and that stillness that moves beyond that moment, what we look for in Tai Chi is a quality of stillness within the movement. And the more we cultivate that, the more chance we have of actually thinking, well, why is it different on one side or another? What am I doing differently? We can notice more. So again, very practical tool with this. And then raising your heel and your toes, thinking about your posture while you do that. Stepping in. Again, remember in the chair, it's about planting the foot, pushing the foot into the floor a little bit. See if you can integrate some of that. And bring your feet back. Okay, go back to your chairs. I was very struck some years ago, not that long after I started teaching actually, where I kind of had a sense for the importance of that idea of memory. And it came about because I was asked to teach some workshops at one of the local village colleges, a series of workshops, and I agreed to do that. And in the second of those workshops, one of the women who'd been at the first one, she came back to it. And she was telling me that she had an interesting experience. She had some kind of executive job, I don't know what. And she was due to give a presentation at a conference. And on her way there, she was driving, she got stuck in traffic, which is a familiar situation to most of us, I think. And she said, you know, it was the usual situation. You're there, you're gripping the steering wheel, you're going to be late, you're getting more and more frantic. And less and less comfortable, and so on and so forth. And she finally got to the conference centre, parked the car. She said she jumped out the car, grabbed her bag, ran into the conference centre, and was going up to the doors of the room where the conference was being held. And she said, I suddenly stopped. It was what she told me. She said, and she remembered how she felt on the Tai Chi day, that calmer, quieter feeling. And she said she just stopped and she sat down in the chair next to the door for a couple of minutes and thought about her posture and her breathing and so on and so forth, and just calmed down, got up. She said, I felt much better. She was still late because nothing was going to change that, but she just opened the door, walked into the conference room, went up to the top and said, look, sorry I'm late, I got stuck in traffic. And everybody went, oh well, we all know that one. This is in the days for mobile phones, so nobody knew what had happened, but it was still a familiar situation. And it was that memory of that quieter feeling that enabled her to do that and to cope with the stress of a situation like that. Very, very simple idea, really, when you think about it, but one that is very much, I think, at the heart of the Tai Chi practice. And when we think that it doesn't work just on a mental level, but works on a physical level, relates to the stress and the tension we're feeling in our bodies, but also, as we know from Tai Chi, these things also have an effect on our mobility, our stability, and on our health in general. Then that principle of coming back to something like that actually is actually a very important one that we learn in Tai Chi. So we come to Embrace Tiger, Return to the Mountain. This really encapsulates those ideas. So let your hands drop down and then embrace the tiger, return to the mountain. As I probably said before, for me, in that sense, the tiger represents just our daily lives, really, which can be very busy and lacking in that quietness and that stillness. We return to the mountain. The mountain is this symbol of quietness and stillness, and interestingly also strength. One more time. And rest. Lovely. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you for joining in. I hope you enjoyed the session.
Yes, thank you.
Of course, do feel free to unmute yourself.
Thank you.